Wandering the Demon Castle, Chapter 7, First Part. Once he was done toweling and changing his clothes, Bly felt like he'd come back to life. "Paradise, pure paradise," he said, sprawling on a bed. Jessa and Josette came in and said, "I think it best we all stay awake together until dawn. Let's head into the living room." "Yes, ma'am," Bly grumbled reluctantly. But as the same thought had occurred to him, he went out into the living room without further complaint. Beth and Arbuckle were already there. They were side by side, peering out a window. "Hey, what's going on?" Bly asked. Beth replied, "Someone's coming." "Come for us already," Bly said, adjusting his grip on the spear and taking their spot at the window. Something was indeed coming that way through the rain. No figure, no two. One of them was carrying the other. The two of them had almost reached the farmhouse before it became evident they were Jan and Emily. There was a pounding at the door. "Don't open it," Bly told the others, and he went over to it instead. Naturally, he was concerned about whether or not the two of them had been attacked. "Please open up," Jan said in a voice that seemed to creep from the depths of the earth. "The two of us went out to the road, but no matter how long we followed it, we always came back to the same place. And finally, a tree fell. Lost our horses and our bags. Got hurt, too. Hurry up. Hurry up and let us in, please." Bly clucked his tongue. Head and heart both vacillated. "We can't," Josette said, the barrel of her gun aimed at the door. She had more of a handle on the situation than Bly did. Bly looked at the other two. "We can't," Beth said flatly. Sighing sadly in his heart, Bly asked Arbuckle, "What do you say we do?" "I leave that to you." Don't just shrug this off, Bly thought, bracing himself for the worst. Turning toward the door, he said, "Sorry, but we can't. We've got no proof you two ain't fallen into the nobility's hands." "Huh," Bly exclaimed, finally noticing that there was no longer any indication of anyone outside the door. He called out to them, but still there was no answer. "Look out the window," the man said. Beth raced over, then cried out, "They've collapsed." "I'm opening it up," Bly declared. Disregarding Josette's shouts not to, the man opened the door. Jan lay right in front of the door, with Emily still cradled in his arms. The blood that soaked the right half of his body bright red was now painting a ring around him. "Sheesh," Bly said, the word escaping in a low tone. The right side of Jan's head was horribly crushed. Emily's head no longer resembled one at all. Checking both for a pulse and looking at their pupils, Bly let out a deep sigh. "I'm surprised they made it back here. Okay, we've got to bury him." D and Grey Lancer appeared in one of the corridors. "He's here," Grey Lancer said, using his long spear to point up ahead. D, too, had noted U-Taker so far off he couldn't be seen with the naked eye. "Leave this to me," Grey Lancer said, stepping forward. He was poised to hurl his long spear. "If we dispose of him, at least, there seems little chance of anyone making any strange creations." And saying that, the nobleman made his throw. An instant later, U-Taker staggered. The crimson long spear stabbed through his chest and protruded from his back. "Well done," D said, because there had been essentially no time lag between when the nobleman had hurled his weapon and when it had pierced his target. This was the very definition of undated speed. Would D's own speed at drawing and striking with his blade be a match for it? "I'll deliver the coup de grace," Grey Lancer said, walking forward with bold strides. He was unarmed, though there was absolutely nothing the giant could do if D were to try to cut him down at that moment. He didn't seem the least bit afraid. When the nobleman had closed to about 10 yards, U-Taker's body unexpectedly became a blur. "That's not good." Before Grey Lancer had even finished saying the words, something white flew from D's right hand. The needle of unfinished wood went through U-Taker's body and jabbed into the floor. It was followed by a second, but a split second before was to pierce him, and the enemy vanished without a sound. He wasn't destroyed. If he had been, there'd be dust left. Grey Lancer said, his lips twisting with displeasure. He vanished, and there's only one thing that could do that. Grey Lancer shook his head. I don't know. Most likely the same place Utaker went. Should we go back to the Duchess? I can't control the teleportation device. But do you think she set this all up? Probably. Can you think of any other possibility? Toward what end? The purpose this facility serves, Dee replied. To make a new life form, one that is neither noble nor human. Do you have data on humans? Indeed we do. How does that compare to living humans? Well, said Grey Lancer, flesh with blood pumping through it would give the very best results. One of them vanished from the village above us. What? Grey Lancer exclaimed, a terrible light in his eyes. Apparently you didn't know about that, did you? I swear on the sacred ancestor's good name. I knew that human specimens would be the best, and that was what the Duchess desired. However, I didn't suspect she'd actually got her hands on. You let your guard down too easily. Don't say that. The giant replied, scratching his head. It was such a typically human affectation. It seemed incredibly endearing. At any rate, let's head back. The two of them went down the corridor and came to an elevator. Its doors remained closed. They won't budge. What's that slut up to? Now we're the ones who are an obstacle to her. Grey Lancer stared at Dee. The hunter had struck at the very heart of the matter. She has a chance to combine all three species. Dee continued. I doubt she'll let it go to waste, and we intend to stop that from happening. Wait just a moment. Grey Lancer protested. The prototype was clearly after you. Even if that was of its own volition, the fact that it appeared right in front of you was probably the Duchess's doing. So she wanted to remove one of her obstacles. We've known each other for a long time, but I may have worn out my welcome, as the saying goes. Grey Lancer said with a grin, rubbing his droop boulder-like jaw. It was the way someone smiled after drinking something awfully bitter. While perhaps not in the same way as Dee, the greater nobleman had surely lived an intense life. However, if that's the case, things become somewhat more complicated. No one but the Duchess herself knows each and every nook and cranny of this facility. Do you know the general layout? Yes, more or less. Then show me the way to where the genetic experiments are done. A simple enough request, normally. Grey Lancer replied, a world-beating glint in his eye, and a sad smile, wholly unlike his earlier grin, skimming across his lips. The nobleman was enjoying this, and he was looking forward to the mountains of corpses and the rivers of blood he and Dee were going to leave in their wake. Unit after unit of soldiers from the facility's slumbering peacekeeping forces will be activated, he continued. And there's no way to reach the laboratory without plowing headlong through the area where they'll be lying in wait. And you objected with going with me? No, it's an honor. Grey Lancer swung his long spear. The roaring wind from it tousled Dee's hair, but the inhumanely beautiful face it framed wore a smile. It was the sort of smile to make anyone who saw want to brag for the rest of their lives that they'd been the one to put it there. As Grey Lancer was enraptured, Dee said to him, let's go. Okay. An hour had passed since the others had buried the pair, and the world outside was crammed full of rain and darkness. Is Dee not coming back? And that was the thought that held sway in every mind in the group. Though strangely enough, not one of them gave voice to it, for they all knew that his return would be an impossible stroke of luck. Despite the fact that fear and worry seemed ready to split them open from the inside, a certain kind of quiet and composure hung in the living room. In a manner of speaking, in the face of certain death, they'd had a small taste of hope. "Quiet, isn't it?" Arbuckle said from where he sat in an armchair, looking at the clock on the wall. Even now it kept time perfectly. "A little more than 3 hours till daybreak. That sure is a long time." "It'll be here before you know it," Bly replied. Josette, who'd been there silently stroking the barrel of her weapon, said, "You're really determined to make it out of here alive, aren't you? Have you got someone waiting for you out there?" And the roughneck nodded. "Yeah, I've got about 100 favorite gals out there. Aren't you worried about your hubby, lady?" "Oddly, no." "Lady, you're a cold one." "Yes, I'm sure I am," Josette replied, not seeming the least bit angry, and she let her eyes wander through space. "He taught me how to be a warrior at heart. As he used to say, don't trust other people. Use anyone, even a child, as a shield. Always stash enough food and weapons for yourself somewhere on the battlefield. If you think you're going to lose, even if everyone around you is ready to fight, to the death, run for it. You can't fight if you don't survive. All these despicable notions, right? There was only one that I actually liked. Tell yourself you're going to die alone." Bly shut his eyes, while Beth gazed intently at Josette's profile from her seat on the sofa. Arbuckle was fidgeting with his pocket watch. "That's a good thought to keep in mind," Bly said, his tone like that of a mannequin. Just then, Beth got up and left the living room, probably to use the bathroom. She'd be gone less than 30 seconds when a scream pierced the air. "I'll check it out, stay here," Josette cried out, going after her. Create a disturbance out back, then hit them from the front, a divisionary tactic. At times the nobility's strategies were remarkably simple. Josette soon came back, pushing Beth along as she did. "It was a bat monster," Beth kept repeating, slumping down on the sofa. "I saw through the window. It was so big, like a human with wings, only the face. It was Emily." Josette wrapped her arms around the girl's trembling form. First part and second part. Duty calls, doctor. Arbuckle came over, bag in hand, expertly checking the girl's pulse. He then put his hand against her brow to see if she was feverish. "No need to worry, she's just in a slight state of shock. I'll give her a shot to relax her. Okay, get that sleeve rolled up." Pulling a needle and syringe from his bag, Arbuckle filled it with medicine from a bottle, got the air out, and quickly jabbed it into Beth's arm. Beth made a little face when he pulled the needle out again, then pressed a cotton swab soaked in alcohol to the mark it left. "So you really were a doctor, weren't you?" Josette said, her tone making it painfully clear how impressed she was. "Well, after a fashion. I come from a long line of physicians. That crest on your bag, I've seen it somewhere before." "Oh, that's right. Sudden Creek in the southern frontier. Isn't that the McCandless families? This is just something I won in a card game a long time ago." Stowing his things in the bag and shutting the flap, Arbuckle once again took the pulse of Beth, who was lying down. Barely open eyes looked up at him vacantly. "It's kind of ironic. You save a girl's life, but still have to cart her off to hell." Josette was probably referring to Emily. "Why couldn't you have stayed, doctor?" "On account of gambling and drinking and women," Bly said from over by the window. Arbuckle replied indignantly, "Keep your remarks to yourself, will you?" "But I'm right on the mark, ain't I?" He chortled. "A flesh peddler. Playing at being a doctor is just too damn funny. But if you don't hurry up and settle on one of the two, you're going to find that chasing both brings you to a bad end." Anger tinged Arbuckle's red face. He banged his right wrist against his thigh, and a little concealed gun shot from his shirt sleeves into the palm of his hand. The hammer was cocked. "Stop!" Josette shouted, but before she'd even finished, both the top and bottom barrels of the little gun belched fire. At the same time, the window next to Bly shattered into a million pieces, but not from the pistol shots. Those were right on target. They'd gone right through the heart of the winged figure that had just burst through the window pane. "Everyone down," Arbuckle shouted, firing a second volley as he dashed toward Bev. Bly stood there defiantly with his back to them, facing a thing that actually had Jan's face. In fact, it had his body as well. The only thing that changed was that he now had wings growing out of his back. "They've undergone some sort of reconstructive surgery," Arbuckle shouted as he stuffed bullets into his concealed weapon. Having taken 2 hits and with the resulting small-caliber bullet holes in both the right and left sides of his chest, the monster that had once been Jan still flew effortlessly into the sky. But a terrible force then honeycombed his body. When his body dropped to the floor along with mortar and chunks of the ceiling, it looked just like a battered old rag, but it recovered swiftly enough. "Rest in peace, creep," Bly bellowed, charging forward. Yozet's attack had done no more than halt the demon briefly. Its accursed heart was only a weakness when pierced by the legendary weapon of antiquity. The short spear was driven deep into him, but with an anguished, twisted expression, Jan pulled it out again. And Bly, who still gripped the shaft of it, was sent flying with a single swing of the spear. "You must have missed." "Underhanded bullshit. I'd put down the lot of them." Bly's shouts bounced off the ceiling and walls before fading away. A dark sense of fatigue enveloped all of them. As if to shake off the gloom, Yozet looked at Beth and said, "You did good, you know." She was referring to the way the girl had destroyed Jan. "Right through the heart with a single thrust. Even for pros, that's no easy thing to pull off." "I wasn't even thinking," Beth replied, trembling from head to toe. Sweat dripped down on her knees like a faint drizzle. "Hold on to that spear. It might come in handy again." Yozet turned her gaze to the world beyond the window, adding, "Sure is a long night, isn't it?" The sound of the rain swallowed her words. Beth's head suddenly sunk forward. Yozet had noticed intense sleepiness sweeping over her. This is bad. They must be behind this. Her consciousness swayed wildly. If it gave way, the darkness would ride in, and the nobility and their servants would be at the reins. Can't fall asleep. Just can't. And there was no one there to wake Yozet up when she fell to the floor. Both the men were slumped back against the wall, breathing easily in their sleep. A figure was visible through the window pane. Beth got to her feet. A blank look on her face, she seemed like a different person. Going over to the window without a sound, she touched her finger lightly to the lock, undoing it. In came Emily, accompanied by the sound of the rain. All 3 of those abducted by the nobility had been bidden and made their servants, and Beth had probably slain Jan in order to earn the others' trust. Looking down at their former compatriots, now helpless captives of the Sandmen, the 2 girls shared a grin. They were the sort of smiles to make anyone's hair stand on end. "Who do you want to feed on?" Emily inquired. "You can choose first," said Bev. "You've been hard at work out there in the rain. Take your pick. It was unfortunate about your lover, but please don't hold it against me." "Don't worry about him. When we were human, I had the worst time trying to keep him from cheating on me. Got so depressed I tried to kill myself more than once. Before we were made like this, the thought of being stuck with him disgusted me. But now I'm finally free of him. Are you sure you don't mind me choosing who I want, though?" Bev nodded in response to Emily's query. 2 pairs of eyes, which at some point had begun to give off blood light, concentrated their gaze on the 2 men and 1 woman. "Well, I really do like my men young," Emily said, licking her lips. No trace remained of the cute sweetheart she'd been before. Now she wore the face of a blood-starved demon. Quickly squatting down beside Bly, she pulled back his collar. Tilting his head to one side, she exposed his carotid artery. The sight of the blue blood vessel running beneath his suntan skin made Emily swallow hard. When the girl opened her mouth as wide as it would go, the fangs revealed weren't those of a noble. They belonged to a carnivorous beast, and they seemed suited less for piercing skin and more for tearing through flesh and bone with a single bite. However, Emily didn't actually get to put her fangs to the test. It was Beth who first noticed something. A figure in black suddenly loomed beside Emily, and though she couldn't see the face, the rest of him was beautiful enough to enrapture her. "Dee?" Beth groaned in astonishment. At that moment, Emily turned for a look, and as she turned, her right hand swung around, but not with the strength of a human being. She swung it with the strength and speed of a vampire. It should have taken off everything on Dee's head above the temple. Dee stood in the very same position, not budging an inch. His right hand went into action. A bloody mist sailed through the air. Clutching her neck, Emily backed away. Fresh blood gushed from between her fingers. Beth hurled her short spear. It went through Dee's heart and stuck in the wall behind him, but the hunter made another swipe of his blade. Shrieking, Beth jumped back 10 feet. The air swirling in her wake as she dashed to the window and made an effortless jump out into the rain, where she vanished. And Emily was only seconds behind her. However, a rough wooden needle struck her back, piercing her right through the lung. In the arc of her leap, thrown into disarray, Emily thudded to the ground but quickly got to her feet again and dashed off. Crying out with pain and fear, she ran and ran. When the two women came to the base of the watchtower, they paused to catch their breath. Their stark faces seemed to say, "Could that really be Dee?" However, another question seemed plastered over 9/10 of those faces. Reaching a hand behind her, Emily pulled out the needle that was stuck in her back. Her other hand remained pressed to the wound on her neck. The cut on her neck stopped just shy of the vertebrae, and the needle had narrowly spared her heart. So neither wound had been fatal. However, Dee's attacks rarely let anyone off that lightly. Emily should have been dead twice over. "That really was Dee, wasn't it?" Beth asked. From the top of her head all the way down to her forehead, the rain was pounding against her bloody, exposed brain. Ordinarily, that would have been a fatal wound. "I'm sure of it. But there was something different about him." Beth nodded at Emily's reply. Every move she made caused the blood seeping from the top of her head to stain her chest and the ground. Emily continued. "All our attacks went right through him, and while his sword wounded us, it didn't manage to destroy us. It was Dee, but at the same time it wasn't Dee. In which case..." The two girls looked back the way they'd come, toward the farmhouse where Bly and the others slumbered. Turning then toward the east, Emily said, "We've got until it starts getting light over yonder. Just how long should that sleep juice in your blood keep working?" "A little over 3 hours," Beth replied. "That's almost until daybreak. Should be no challenge," Emily said, baring her stark fangs in a smile. Both of them were covered in blood. Their breathing was ragged too. In a manner of speaking, they were half dead from their wounds. However, when Emily smiled, there was no longer any fear of the gorgeous vampire hunter in her. Second part, end. Third part. The fire that had broken out somewhere in the facility and the resulting malfunctions were not major concerns for the Duchess. All she needed to do was to isolate that sector. The nobility had such signs at their disposal that, if they so wished, they could put out a fire as large as a frontier sector with an extinguisher no larger than the tip of the Duchess's little finger. And yet, while the way they had nothing better here for battling the flames than the ancient standbys of water and antiquated foam extinguishers, seemed to be taking their love of nostalgia entirely too far. The Duchess herself didn't feel that way. She, too, was a member of the nobility. "Well now, I simply must make the sacred ancestors' hopes a reality before those two manage to locate me." The Duchess raised her right hand. The image that appeared in midair was that of the warrior, Lyle Brennan. His eyes were closed. He was unconscious, having remained behind despite his wife's wishes. He'd been easy enough for the Duchess to abduct. Two more figures appeared. One was Utaker, and the other the prototype. Grouping the figures together in midair, the Duchess used one hand to carry them to the back of the room. There, too, Unglim's laboratory lay there. The Duchess tossed all three of them, and each landed at length on a table. At the same time, machinery that had lain dormant lit up, and innumerable tubes and cords plugged into the trio of bodies. The time has come, finally, to give my blessing to the new fruits of this research. For millennia I have developed these techniques of reconstruction, nay, of creation, and now I shall use them to bring a new form of life into being. And then the eyes of the fearsome noblewoman grew dark. However, my actions run counter to the sacred ancestors' orders. That I cannot do. I realize you wish to become something stronger, so I leave the rest to the three of you. One thing bothers me, Grey Lancer said, halting as if he just remembered something. Looking back at Dee, he continued. The research here always ended in failure, and it was because of that the Duchess descended into madness. Nothing from the hunter. If it is impossible to succeed in a sane frame of mind, she had no choice but to plunge into the abyss of insanity. Only there would she find the clue that would give rise to a new form of life, she insisted. And did she find it? I don't know. To be honest, I'm not even sure whether she returned to her senses, or if even now she wanders a dark world of fears. The nobleman extended a single finger that was long and thick. It still seemed gorgeous. If she can produce some new, normal form of life with the secret she obtained, that's no problem. But if it's some twisted, insane thing befitting a world of madness she found, the creatures she creates with it are bound to be misshapen monstrosities. The sort of creatures that would curse the world that gave them life, scorn it, lay waste to it without any regrets. Like something out of myth, Dee said, his voice flowing across the ground, seeping into it. Yes, we must find wishes as soon as possible so that her experiments... Grey Lancer stopped there. Dee picked up the thread, saying, Can you stop her? A pained look contorted the giant's features. He immediately gave a vehement shake of his head, saying, No, I can't. Then there's no point in me working with you any longer. Let's go our separate ways. You say that so easily, Grey Lancer replied with a wry grin. But can you reach her without me to guide you? If this place was constructed at the sacred ancestors' bidding, I should manage. Grey Lancer studied Dee's gorgeous features with gleaming eyes, quickly nodded, then said, Yes, you probably could at that. Very well then, Dee. We shall do as you suggest and part company here. Farewell. The nobleman then bowed and promptly walked off in the direction they'd come. After watching him go, Dee started walking in the opposite direction at a brisk pace. Going about 30 feet, he turned and looked back. The huge figure who was back where he'd started quickly ducked behind a corner. As the hunter remained looking that way, the giant poked his head out again. When his eyes met Dee's, he ducked back again, and then came out sheepishly. Apparently the nobleman had intended to trail along behind him. The hunter had no more time to spend with him. This time Dee started forward at an even faster pace. He immediately came to an elevator. Halting there, he began thinking about something. He didn't have his left hand. Dee closed his eyes. The silent contemplation written on his lovely visage suggested he was listening to the voices of the night winds, or else reflecting on some fathomless cosmic philosophy. The color suddenly drained from Dee's face. Not out of fright, rather it was the result of terribly intense concentration. His skin quickly became nearly as clear as glass. Some 40 feet down the corridor, Grey Lancer poked his head around the corner. What's he up to? Just what in the world is he? As the nobleman murmured that, Dee went into action. What's this? The hunter put his right hand against the elevator doors. They opened effortlessly. Wait, I'm getting on. Grey Lancer shouted, dashing down the corridor. The instant the giant form had piled in, the door shut and the elevator began to move. Dee remained standing there like a wrathful deity, his eyes closed. There was no murderous intent about him. However, that was far more unsettling than the instant he drew his sword to square off against someone might have been. Grey Lancer probably never had such an uncomfortable ride, but it was over in just 5 seconds. Grey Lancer watched in silence as Dee stepped out ahead of him, following after the hunter and exiting the elevator. The nobleman unconsciously let a question slip out. "Where are we?" And the nobleman was serious. Though he should have been well acquainted with this bizarre facility, he didn't recognize the spot where they stood now. While in the elevator, his noble sense of direction, far superior to that of human beings, had told him they were racing right, then zooming left, then rising and falling diagonally over and over without rhyme or reason, until ultimately and impossibly spinning in circles. Even the Duchess doesn't know about this. This is one very, very dangerous individual, Grey Lancer murmured to himself. The way he then grinned was truly in character for the nobleman. Just 6 feet up ahead, Dee turned right at the corner. When the nobleman folded suit just a few seconds later, crimson flashes shot out by him on all sides. Particle beams. One of them bored through Grey Lancer's chest. Not showing a hint of pain, he raised his long spear up over his head. The beams all converged on the lengthy head of the weapon. In a few seconds, the firing stopped. This is what put the lance in Grey Lancer. Now watch what it can do. He struck his long spear against the floor. Dozens of streaks of light shot from the head of it, tracing in reverse the paths they'd previously taken, headed back toward the launchers. Fireballs erupted from the walls and ceiling, spreading with ferocious speed as Grey Lancer followed after Dee, for the gorgeous young man had walked away without a baptism of crimson beams. The nobleman came to a spot where the corridor branched off in 5 directions. Now which way should I go? The indications of a violent conflict came from the farthest of the corridors. This seems promising. Muttering to himself that he hoped there'd be no further beam attacks, Grey Lancer dashed on. Turning the corner, he found Dee matching steel with multiple foes a dozen yards away. They were probably the peacekeeping forces for this sector. The men wore green uniforms, the likes of which even Grey Lancer had never seen before, and were armed with spears and shields. And their movements were strangely sharp and quick, and they seemed to be giving Dee trouble. Yeah, right. However, the noted noble warrior was left bugging his eyes. Every time Dee's sword flashed out, members of the peacekeeping force were slain. 9 of them encircled the hunter completely, spinning their spears to distract Dee and attacking at staggered intervals in an attempt to drive him into a corner. Given the length of their spears compared to his sword, their attacks left them at a definite advantage, and from what Grey Lancer saw, they were quite skilled. Dee disregarded all of them. They didn't even bother him. Dee didn't even move a single step from where he was, or even a fraction of an inch for that matter, and he seemed to be swinging his blade without any particular plan. This shouldn't have been happening. The spearmen were supposedly striking from beyond the reach of the hunter's sword, and yet they were slain, one after another. Those who charged in, and those who leapt into the air. Naturally, they would be cut down. But when those out at a safe distance were laid low in fresh blood, Grey Lancer thought it had to be some sort of a miracle, caused by a kind of magic unknown even to the nobleman. It can cut down foes beyond the reach of his blade, Grey Lancer cried out in amazement. Perhaps overhearing him, 3 of the surviving members turned toward the nobleman. All the laser beams fired from the devices on their chests were absorbed by Grey Lancer's long spear. One of the peacekeepers raced forward and hurled his spear. It was traveling faster than sound, faster than a bullet. With the light swing of his long spear, Grey Lancer sent it flying back. Following the exact same course, the spear pierced the heart of the one who'd first hurled it. He was knocked back 30 feet, where he fell to the floor. His whole body turned into liquid, spreading out in all directions. He was an artificial human. In the seconds that battle took, the other two charged to attack. Spears struck at his chest and face simultaneously. But Grey Lancer countered them with his speed. Parrying both at once, he arced his long spear around at the same time, or rather, he spun it like a vortex. Though his two foes tried to release their spears, the weapons wouldn't leave their hands. The vortex spun at speeds more intense than living flesh could bear. Before even a full rotation was complete, the peacekeepers' bodies had been broken down into bizarre flesh and organs. The parts spun with the vortex, and when Grey Lancer stopped his long spear, they hit the floor with tremendous force. Gazing with disgust at the liquid spreading across the floor, Grey Lancer turned then to look over at Dee. The hunter was already walking away. All that remained at the site of his battle were puddles. The way he's going, it doesn't look like I'll ever be a match for him, the nobleman said, whipping his cape around and following after the hunter. The Duchess was bound to have better defenses than this. What other men or foes would stand in their way? Curiosity and excitement about those unknown challenges made the greater nobleman feverish from head to toe. A dozen yards ahead of Grey Lancer, Dee continued his advance. Without warning, his footing gave way. The passageway beneath his feet had sunk. Dee fell. Not only that, but the gigantic form of Grey Lancer also fell through the air. He'd watched as the walls and ceiling had crumbled like spun glass. Below he could see water bearing its white fangs. Is that the sea? Since ancient times the tales had been spread, the vampires feared running water, and once in it, they wouldn't surface again. And now hunter and hunted plummeted like rocks toward the eddying waters of that impossible distant sea. Chapter 7, End. The Birth of a New Species. Chapter 8, First Part. In the living room of the farmhouse, the tension was congealing into a jet-black mass. The sound of the driving rain seemed to send a miasma into the air. 2 hours to go, Arbuckle said, putting his pocket watch away and beginning to use his knife to sharpen a wooden stake he'd scrounged somewhere. What about Jan's corpse? He asked. He wasn't talking about its location. I went and had a look at him, Yozet replied from the back door, which he'd just come through. No problem there. There's never been a case of a vampire run through the heart coming back to life. Now, we don't know about that, Arbuckle countered, brushing off the wood shavings that had collected in his lap. The monsters here in this village are somehow different from the ones we all know. Who's to say the servants of the nobility are exceptions to that? I really don't like the sound of that, Bly said, abandoning his surveillance from the window and getting to his feet. Think I'll have a peek at him, too. Once he vanished through the doorway, Yozek glared at Arbuckle and then, after hesitating for a moment, followed after Bly. Jan's corpse lay in the middle of the floor, checking him for a pulse and making sure he wasn't breathing. Bly gave a stiff smile and said, Looks like we're okay here. Pulling a crumpled paper package from his pocket, Bly took out a cigarette and lit it. Those aren't very good for your health. What are you, a schoolmarm? Expelling smoke, Bly stood at the warrior's wife. Yosa didn't avert her gaze. She stared right back at Bly until he became uncomfortable, then asked, So, where were you headed? A village not far from here. It's called Angyo. Know it? No. Didn't think so. Why? If you don't mind me asking, that is. I know somebody there. Have something to deliver. You don't say. Ain't you worried about your husband? Bly asked, his query mainly intended to try to take her off her edge. Even if I were, it wouldn't matter, would it? Lady, you're a lousy liar. The woman arched an eyebrow quizzically. You're so worried about him, you can barely stand it, he continued. Hell, it's written all over your face, but it's about time you gave up on him. I know. So kindly drop it, will you? Yes, ma'am, Bly replied, taking another drag on his cigarette. We better not let our guard down, said the woman. The two of them out there have the strength and cunning of the nobility. Yeah, I know that, but we've done all we can do, too. Mock nobility or not, they won't be so quick to come at us. I hope you're right, Yozet said, her reply not entirely free of fear. The vampires in this village are a little different. Bly smiled and said, well, we'll manage somehow. One way or another, I'm gonna stay alive and make it out of the village, and you and the flesh peddler are coming with me. You're pretty confident of that? Yeah, just leave it to me. Can't believe it, Yozet murmured weakly. What do you mean? I ain't lying. No, it's nothing, Yozet said elusively, her previous cryptic remarks spurred by how different from her husband she found Bly to be. Through all their days of trying battle, not once had Yozet's husband tried to protect her. He only charged in to help her in accordance with pre-made plans. Even then, when things got out of control, Brennan left it to Yozet to handle them. He'd left her behind. The only thing that had saved Yozet from fearsome servants of the nobility or death at the hands of wanted men was her own luck and skill. Traveling with a husband who didn't care about whether his wife lived or died, Yozet had felt her heart become a vast and barren wasteland. But now that was at an end. It had been stopped by words like, just leave it to me, and coming with me. Hey, Bly said, wearing an expression of amazement. Are you crying? Wouldn't you like to know? Yozet replied, batting her eyes and shaking her head. At any rate, let's hang tough until daybreak. Yeah, ain't no telling where those bastards will try hitting us. That unpredictable pair was up in a watchtower, only 100 yards from the farmhouse. They were more than 60 feet off the ground. Wind and rain lashed at them head-on. They looked at a window of light spilling from it. Since their outer defenses are strong, we'll just have to topple them from within, Emily said, gnashing her trenchant fangs. Beth remained silent, gazing at her compatriot. But we're a new type, right? Last time didn't work, but now we can do this. Emily pursed her lips. What escaped them wasn't a whistle. It was a thin tube that was red, as if choked with blood. The tip of it tapered like a needle, and taking it in hand, Emily rested her chin on the railing surrounding the watchtower. Her breath hissed out, and with it her tongue stretched. Shaken all the while by the wind and rain that hammered them, at first glance it looked weak, and with the strength of a steel cable it kept stretching farther and farther. It was about 100 yards to the farmhouse. Easily stretching that far, the tongue started to descend, bound for a chimney. You know their location? Beth asked. Soaking wet and with eyes closed, Emily didn't reply, but after about 5 minutes she finally said, Found them. Her eyes closed, opened. They gave off a glow the same color as blood. There was only a single chimney, but it was connected to every fireplace in the house to rid them of their smoke. Probing it, she'd found something. 2 of them were in there, but they left, said Emily, for she had an eye at the tip of her tongue. It must have been some sort of sensory organ. Here we come, Jan, Beth exclaimed, an evil smile spreading across her face. A flash of lightning bleached it white. We'll give you the life of a noble once again. The thin red tube crept from the ancient stonework of the fireplace. The way it wriggled over to Jan's corpse without hesitation called to mind a snake. Stopping by the right side of his head, it reared up like a striking serpent, and then plunged right into Jan's ear. The red blood-like liquid coursed through the tube. As Yozet had stated, vampires who'd been run through the heart didn't come back to life again. But look, was a healthy Hunok slowly creeping into his pale flesh. His heart wasn't beating, yet the crimson fluid flowed through Jan's veins, and his fingers began to close tightly. Even a vampire would have found this an unearthly world of strutting monsters. The Duchess was pleased with her success. 2 of her obstacles had vanished into watery graves in the artificial sea, which meant that there was no longer anyone to impede her ambitions. An hour had passed, and she'd already begun creating the new life form. Based on all the data accumulated up until now, The operation proceeded so smoothly it surprised even her, with only one procedure remaining before her aims had been met. In the control sphere for this experimental facility that was the pinnacle of noble science, the Duchess stared down with irony at the rusty lever by her hand. The final pull that would determine the results of so many experiments would come from this old-fashioned iron lever. And somewhere in her heart, the noblewoman was able to take a cold view of that anachronism. In the center of the laboratory there stretched a vast pool that looked large enough to house more than 100 sharks. Blue-green water spread farther than the eye could see, foaming, and bubbles roiled to the surface. The control sphere suddenly floated into the air, soundlessly gliding through space thanks to its gravity field propulsion system. It halted in midair at the point indicated by the numerical data, the center of the enormous pool. The trappings of a laboratory were nowhere to be seen. By means unknown, the pitch-black sky was split by the starkness of lightning. The Duchess ran her eyes over the figures. Each and every value was perfectly correct. She felt satisfaction and confidence, and a touch of apprehension. 2 of the figures were off by 1 quadrillionth. The computer said that was due to the genetic fusion. However, it also stated that such a tiny discrepancy wouldn't be a problem. The figures for the DNA fusion process are being distorted. Was the mysterious equation wrong? No, that can't be. The Duchess's right hand reached for the final lever. Go. Just as she was about to throw the lever, there was a change to the diagram above her head. Intruder alert, it declared. A blue ball of light shot up from the water, swallowing the control sphere. The control sphere creaked under the fierce molecular impact. Who dares? The Duchess groaned, but even then she knew the answer. From the bottom of the sphere, a silvery mass about 6.5 feet long dropped into the water. Once underwater, it took on the most effective shape for propulsion, going on the attack in 1/10 of a second. The bluish-green expanse gave rise to a dome of light about 30 feet in diameter. Its color deepened by the second, and it swelled larger and larger. The control sphere had risen to an altitude of 1,500 feet, and within it the Duchess sensed that her counterattack had ended fruitlessly. There was no numerical data. Her own noble instincts told her so. The light that had colored the control sphere's field of view for an instant was already gone. You realize all this kicking and screaming is no use. You are... Having the control sphere drop down to just shy of the bubbling surface of the water, the Duchess switched the numerical display over to directional readings. There was no need to do so. A supple figure was coming disinterestedly across the water's surface straight toward the sphere. Boots ankle-deep in the water, he showed no hesitation in his strides. Lightning made his face blaze from the darkness. The Duchess's features warped with rapture. D. First part end. Second part. Precisely. It was D. The young man had supposedly fallen from the crumbling passageway and disappeared into the choppy sea below, but now he moved. Eerily across the sea's surface, halting about 10 yards from Helderling. Her breathing now ragged for some reason, the Duchess said, D, what are you doing here? I fell into the sea, D replied, and there was someone else with me. He had a compact bathysphere with him. Grey Lancer. And was he responsible for that missile a moment ago as well? That miserable traitor. Rather than curse him, you should be cursing yourself for dropping me into a sea that connected back here. The Duchess looked as if a wave had washed across her face. Ah, I see. It would seem I've underestimated your abilities. Wait. I shall summon an appropriate opponent for you now. At that instant, a crimson beam shot from the blue-green water. Penetrating the control sphere's force field with ease, it unleashed its full power. The white-hot flow of energy spread across the water's surface, engulfing D in the blink of an eye. In no time, the flashes of lightning brought the lonely surface of the water out in relief, like a challenge thrown at eternity. There was no one there. But look, in one spot the surface of the water had begun to bubble. A wind rose, waves formed, their crests torn by the wind. Wasn't that the way this planet had been in the distant past? Lightning struck the surface of the water, which even now hadn't ceased bubbling. Ions were released and steam billowed up to hide even the crests of the waves. Watch. From beneath the madly beating waves, a new form was rising eerily. The light died. It was as if it were afraid to illuminate that form. A thing stood on the water's surface. Leaving blind Arbuckle on watch in the living room, Josette did a loop through the rest of the farmhouse once more, making sure all the doors and windows were locked. She was just about to head back to the living room when there was a faint sound in the next room. Apparently a piece of furniture had moved. However, there was nothing in there but Jan's corpse. Sliding the minigun's firing mechanism into her left hand, Josette used her right to draw the short spear she had tucked through the back of her belt. She turned the doorknob with the same hand that held the firing button. Pushing the door open as she turned the knob, she flashed in the light that was mounted on her minigun. A wind struck her cheek. No one was there. And Jan's corpse, it was gone. The circle of light illuminated naught save the lonely wooden floor. Josette trained the light on the window. It was open. Wind and rain were blustering in. Though she'd had no intention of entering the room, the thought that she had to shut the window got her moving first. She practically ran over to the window. Once she'd locked it, relief bubbled up in her. For a split second, she let the tension escape her, and then her body was squeezed from behind with vice-like strength. Something warm latched onto the nape of her neck. Josette shifted the barrel of the minigun ever so slightly, and then hit the firing button. The barrel had been pointed backward to deal with the attack from behind, and now it showered her foe with long-awaited gunfire. The vice-like grip loosened, and then was torn free. Making a broad turn purely on instinct, Josette let her short spear fly. Having taken the barrage, Jan's body had been nearly cut in two above the waist. The spear went right through his heart. The force of the impact nailed his upper body to the wall, and his lower half tore free and fell to the floor. When she saw it stagger back to its feet, Josette let out a cry that was almost a shriek and started firing the minigun indiscriminately. Even after her target was reduced to a bloody mist, even after the minigun had run out of ammo, the woman still held down the firing button. It was Bly that finally stopped her, saying, "Simmer down. What happened?" "Jan came back to life." "You've got to be joking." Looking over at the wall, Bly started toward where Jan's upper body hung. One shot right through the ticker, and the man noted, "Shouldn't be a problem now. If it's happened twice, it can happen a third time. Cut his head off." "Okay. You ought to head back to the living room." "No, I have to see it for myself." When Bly came back with a machete in his hand, Josette said to him, "I think you might have noticed this already." With that, she took away the hand she had pressed to her neck. A pair of teeth marks had been left over the carotid artery. Bly's eyes went wide. Instinctively, he backed away, but that reaction was unavoidable. "Jan bit you, but he's being destroyed. His teeth marks should have disappeared." "You sure it wasn't Beth or Emily?" "It was Jan," Josette replied warily. "There really is something different about the nobility around here. They're a new type, so their victims must be too. What should we do?" "Kill me. At least that's what I should tell you, but I'll try everything else first. We've got a fire going, don't we?" "Yeah." The two of them went back to the living room. There was no sign of Arbuckle. The window was open. "Where the hell's he gone?" Bly exclaimed, looking around wildly. "Got attacked, most likely. Forget about him. It might just be they're all here in the house." "Oh, that'd be fun." After a world-beating grin, Bly gave Josette a worried look. She said to him, "Vampires who come back from the dead after being stabbed through the heart. Nobility whose victims still turn into vampires even after the noble responsible has been destroyed. There's bound to be real trouble if we don't take care of Beth and Emily. If they get out of the village and start feeding on humans, there'll be no stopping them at that point. We have to save them here. Here I was, ready to finish myself off, but I guess I'll have to put that off until later. What the hell am I supposed to do about you? Bly stammered. For the time being, patch me up. After that, if you see me acting even the slightest bit strange, go right ahead and run me through the heart and chop off my head. Bly could only stare at Yelzette dismally after the outlandish thing she just said. However, a mysterious glint had filled his eyes. It was an emotion he'd long forgotten. Respect. Yelzette turned herself around and went over to the heater. Taking the tongs from beside the fireplace and pulling a piece of coal from the box beside it, she placed the black nugget in the fire. The coal immediately started to glow. Hey! Bly shouted at her. Just then the warrior woman pressed the blazing lump against her neck. Bly raced over, but before he could pull the tongs and coal away, Yelzette dropped to one knee on the floor. She must have had a frightening amount of mental and physical fortitude to withstand the pain so well. Though Bly crinkled his brow at the stench of burning flesh, the emotion that had taken root in his chest only grew stronger, like a rock upon which waves would break futilely. Reaching out his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, he put his arm around Yosette's shoulders and slowly helped her to her feet, then led her over to the sofa. Thank you. Don't mention it. But I've heard about this treatment of yours too. Unless you sprinkle the magic water on the wound you seared, all you wind up with is a bad burn. Still, it'll buy me about 2 hours, Yelzette retorted. After that, well, you know what I need you to do. Are you delegating responsibility now? Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yelzette placed her hand on top of the one the man had resting on her shoulder. From the front hall, a voice that sounded like it had been starved of oxygen for 10 millennia said, No. Leave everything to me. The eyes of the pair came to focus on a spot where Arbuckle stood. Keep back, you SOB. Bly snarled, short spear at the ready. There was no way a man who disappeared with a pair of vampiresses was still normal. I wish I could tell you I'm fine, but they got me, Arbuckle said, showing them the back of his right hand. Yelzette took one look at it, then shut her eyes. Well, damnation, Bly growled. Now I've got to put you down too. What about the 2 girls? Before I knew it, there were 2 pairs of bright red eyes outside the window. By the time I realized it was their eyes, I was already outside. Fortunately for Arbuckle, the torrential downpour had left Beth and Emily's hypnotic powers weakened, and it was probably on account of that the old procurer was able to bring along the doll Dee had given them. Returning to his senses the instant the rain struck him, Arbuckle had thrown Dee's doll at the pair, just as they were about to pounce on him. The doll had swung its sword and nearly taken off Emily's head, but Beth had dodged the blade and sunk her fangs into Arbuckle's right hand. So then you killed him? Asked Bly. Arbuckle nodded, adding, Not me, but Dee's proxy. We've got nothing more to fear. Well, nothing but me and Yelzette, that is. Damn it all, Bly exclaimed, backing a safe distance away from the 2 of them and keeping his short spear at the ready. Relax. We're still okay. I have magic water with me. If I were to press a burning coal to my neck, it'd probably kill me. But Yelzette will survive. Sprinkle this on her. Arbuckle pulled a slim whiskey flask from, like travelers favored, from the inner pocket of his jacket and tossed it to Bly. Eyeing it skeptically, Bly asked Yelzette, What should I do? Try putting some on me. But on top of that burn, you sure it's okay? In the past, tens of thousands of different spells or drugs have been devised to prevent someone from turning into a noble, but all had proved fruitless. The only exception was a method that had been discovered only 2 short years earlier, which consisted of burning the wound and then purifying it with magic water. But the combination of the 2 was so painful, it sometimes drove people to madness. Most women and children would die from the shock, or else lose their minds. The magic water couldn't be mass-produced, and its existence wasn't common knowledge yet. Seems pretty damn risky, The guy admits to being a vampire, Bly said, riddled with anxiety. Yozette smiled at him and extended her right hand. Once she'd taken the flask and unscrewed the lid, Bly went over to Arbuckle and jammed the tip of his spear against the man's throat. If anything strange happens to her, you're gonna wish you'd never been born. Don't worry. The man reassured him. I'm still human. The pair's exchange was punctuated by a scream. Yozette performed the final treatment. White smoke rose from beneath her left hand, which was pressed to the nape of her neck. She uttered a long wail of pain. It grew thin and hoarse, and then Yozette slumped across the sofa. Second part, and a third part. Bly raised over, brushed aside the woman's hand, and looked at the additional burns. USOB. He snarled, but when he whipped around, Arbuckle had suddenly vanished. Oh, shit. Bly said, his eyes leaping to every corner of the room as he slapped Yozette on the cheek. When she opened her eyes, he let out a sigh of joy and relief. You okay? I'll survive. Her voice was steady. Her complexion was like that of a corpse. Warrior training or not, she was still just a woman of flesh and blood. Her strength was rapidly fading. 2 hours more, Bly said, swallowing the words. Think you can last that long? He fell silent but quickly said, All right. What's going on? Yozette inquired dubiously. I'm going up to the castle. Huh? Yozette said, so surprised she tried to sit up but immediately slumped back again. It's all the fault of the folks up in the castle you wound up like this. They must have come up with some way of helping you. What are you talking about? You'll never make it back alive. I wouldn't be so sure about that. After all, Dee's up there too. There's no guarantee you'll run into him. But if I stay here doing nothing, you ain't gonna last till daybreak. Okay, just hear me out. Get down in the basement. Down there, all you've got to do is shut one door, and they ain't gonna be able to get in. Just wait for me there. A basement. How do you know the place has got one? Earlier, when I was in Jan's room, the carpet on the floor slid to one side and I saw a trapdoor. I see. But you're... Hey, don't worry about me. Bly said, the pain that had rapidly risen in his heart written all over his face. I had me a lady and I couldn't save her. I'll be damned if I'm going to feel that way ever again. Before Yozette could think of anything else to say, powerful arms looped around her back and behind her knees, easily scooping her up. The thing that floated up was greeted by fog and waves and lightning. Aside from its strangely beefy chest, which was actually like a boulder covered in black skin, the rest of its body was exquisitely proportioned. Though its small face and head were also colored jet black, beads of water slid across the surface of arms and legs the same hue that weren't the least bit monstrous, but rather as limber and muscular as those of an athlete. Both Utaker and the prototype are gone, the thing said, the words issuing from its black mouth. Their flesh and blood have become my body, now to venture outside and make the world tremble. The strong will soon gather beneath my banner. Better yet, I can remain alone and do away with the remaining nobility. He began to walk across the water with confident strides. Surely he never could have imagined that another figure would appear with a burst of bubbles from the water surface 20 to 25 feet ahead of him. It was a giant who stood a head taller than the thing but was only half as wide, and in his hand he held a crimson long spear. Grey Lancer, you yet live. The giant laughed aloud, saying, Dee survived. So I had to, too. I'm not meant to face you. Will you not join forces with me? Join forces to do what exactly? Dismantle the world and build a new one in its place. Together. Grey Lancer sneered. Besides, once all the humans and nobility have been disposed of, there won't be anything left of the world. What are you and I supposed to do? Spend our golden years playing cat's cradle or throwing javelins together? Once all life on this planet is extinct, we need only to go to another planet and do the same thing there. So we'd be berserkers. Are you what the sacred ancestor was trying to create? Grey Lancer said, his eyes giving off an angry bloodlight. Precisely, the thing replied, thumping its chest. That is what I was born for. You Taker and the prototype have become my flesh. They're somewhere inside of me, and they work toward the same purpose. Rubbish, Grey Lancer spat, looking toward the heavens. Duchess, are you listening? With one pull of a lever, you've created this misguided individual. Is that what you desired? Was this the sacred ancestor's dream? Nay, I say it is neither. The thing blinked its black eyes. Every inch of Grey Lancer was enveloped by hellfire. That was the will of a greater noble. When you were born in these black waters, you made a mistake somewhere. Was it your human blood, your noble mind, or your OSB flesh? You're out of your mind, and accordingly I should do away with you in the name of the sacred ancestor. Down around Grey Lancer's feet, the black water began swirling. The long spear rose. A thin dribble of water linked the spearhead to the surface of the water. Suddenly, the water twisted, becoming a drill more than 3 feet in diameter that pierced the upper body of the thing. No, the 3-foot-wide drill actually ripped the thing in two. Even after the water drill had vanished, the thing still didn't fall, for a string of blood thinner than any thread connected its two halves. And that one string quickly became 2, became 10, 1,000, 10,000 strings knitting together a body. I suspected that might happen, said Grey Lancer. Of course, he was fully aware this was not only a formidable foe, but an incredible one. Still, the giant was above that, the daring and self-confidence never leaving his face, for this man was renowned as a noble among nobles. The head of the long spear began to turn red. The water gave rise to waves, their crests wide and fractured, from the wind. It's been so long since it flowed through me, the power of this planet. Nay, that of Mars, Venus, Jupiter, perhaps the entire Milky Way. One wave of my lance was enough to repel an entire OSB fleet, and now you shall taste its might. And as the nobleman spoke, a flash of light linked the long spear and the thing. Heaven and earth alike turned stark-wide. From the depths of the light a voice was heard to say, "It's no use, Grey Lancer. Just as you can wield the power of the Milky Way, I have been given the power to destroy the same galaxy. And now I use it to absorb power, pour more into me, make it hotter and more intense. All of it becomes my power. See, it's more than enough." The light still linked the two of them. Grey Lancer shook, for he had felt the blistering energy pouring into every inch of his body. "You're sending it all back at me, I should expect no less," said the nobleman. At that moment, astronomical observatories and stellar research facilities around the world noted a sudden drain of energy from the Milky Way, and that threw them all into a panic. And just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The thing had spread the fingers of its right hand and held its palm out high before Grey Lancer's watchful eyes. What was that inscribed in the gleaming gold of the object it held? "The crest of the sacred ancestor?" Grey Lancer exclaimed in astonishment, backing away. "The king of the nobility, the absolute ruler. Why would you have that?" "Would you defy me, Grey Lancer? Any who bear this crest are to be afforded the same respect as the sacred ancestor. It's the ironclad rule. The very first line of the law of the nobility. I am the sacred ancestor." The fierce voice raced across the surface of the water like a storm across the seas, declaring, "Stand down, Grey Lancer." At the same time, another voice, quiet and gorgeous, said, "Stand down, imposter." Before the location of the second speaker could even be discerned, the surface of the water between the two of them split. Leaping from it was a young man of unearthly beauty garbed in black, and he had a long sword raised to strike. His blade, which had cleaved wind and wave, came down, splitting the thing from the top of its head all the way down to its crotch. The thing's expressionless face twisted into a smirk. After Dee's blade had passed completely through it, not even the line of his cut still remained. Who was this? Who had rendered Grey Lancer's long spear useless, and now deflected Dee's unholy blade? "You absolutely, positively cannot cut me. Only one who could cut the sacred ancestor can cut me down." The thing arched backward and laughed. Bending down, it stuck its right hand into the water, then slowly raised it. Here was something Dee would undoubtedly recognize. What appeared from the black water was a sword belonging to the warrior Lyle Brennan. Dee said, "You've been noble and OSB in a way. I suppose you have accomplished what he planned." In some ways, Grey Lancer was more astonished as he looked at the young man before him than he'd been when he saw the crest of the sacred ancestor. Who did Dee mean by he? This hunter couldn't possibly be. "What did you say just now?" the thing inquired, thrusting its right hand straight at Dee. For the same surprise had seared its body. "Who do you mean when you say he? You couldn't possibly mean the sacred ancestor." "No one can say," Dee replied. His voice was as beautiful as his features. "No one knows if his plans were correct, or if the results were right. Not the humans, not the nobility, not the OSB, not even himself." "Don't say that," the thing with Brennan's voice cried, making a horizontal slash with its blade. Still poised to deftly parry it, Dee sailed backward. When he landed, the thing closed on him. The sword he brought down like a man possessed left Dee shrouded in bluish sparks. "All that parrying does nothing to slay me. Dee, only one in the image of the sacred ancestor can wound me." The thing with Brennan's voice left a cut on Dee's brow with his blade. The blood that dripped down from it touched Dee's lips. His deep dark eyes gave off blood light. "What are you, Dee? Where do you come from, and where are you going?" The figure in black leapt. As the hunter brought his blade down from directly overhead, the thing shouted, "Look," and thrust out his right hand. The sound of bone being cut traveled across the surface of the water. The thing's right wrist rose higher and higher, coming down in the water far off in the distance. Dee ran without making a sound. His wrist still gushing bright blood, the thing that spoke as Brennan prepared to stand against him. Even now his confidence in his own immortality was unshaken. There was an acute pain at the back of his head. Something had been pulled out of it. And now the energy that could control the galaxy was leaking out from the same spot. "Now!" a hoarse voice shouted, its cry spreading as the sea surged and snarled. The sword the thing had raised to parry the blow broke like it was a slip of paper, and his head was split down to the jaw, his whole body blurred by bloody mist. The thing fell back on his back, sending up splashes of water. Several minutes later, Dee and Grey Lancer encountered someone unexpected in the center of the laboratory. It was Bly, blood-soaked and covered with wounds from head to toe, and riding on his shoulder was the hunter's left hand. The hand turned its palm toward Dee and said, "Hello." "I'll have you know," it continued, "that it was yours truly that drove a 4-inch-long needle into the back of the bastard's head while he was being upgraded, and me that latched onto him and yanked it out again, too." "He was the one with you," Dee said, turning his gaze to Bly. "It was most unfortunate the two of you ran into each other," Grey Lancer said, making no attempt to hide his incredulity. "Well, I went down in the elevator and was kind of wandering around when these weird monsters jumped me. Thought I was a goner, but just then this thing dropped down from the ceiling and saved me. Never thought I'd owe my life to a severed hand, but enough about that." Bly went on to tell them what happened to Josette, and asked about a cure. "That won't be a problem.
I got all the info from the computers about the abilities of the things they made here.
The left-hand assured them. Following its directions, the group prepared medicine and dashed back to the farmhouse. But what they found in the basement were the bodies of Arbuckle and Josette, dead by each other's hands. The man had taken a short spear through the heart, while the woman's neck had been torn halfway through by sharp claws. The bastard must have snuck down there before Josette went in, Bly said, sounding like he could hardly bear it. For it was Arbuckle who'd given Josette the magic water. "You die alone, eh?" he murmured. Those had been Josette's words. Looking out the window, Grey Lancer said, "It would appear the rain has let up too." The patter of raindrops had died away, and the watery blue light had begun to fill the eastern sky. "I guess it's about time for me to leave," Grey Lancer said, looking at the others and giving Dee a grin. "A long, long time ago, a human girl taught me a saying. I'm not exactly sure if this is the sort of time to use it, though." "How did it go?" asked Dee. An illustration by Yoshitaka Amano.
You only go around once, they say. Apparently, it means sometimes you never meet again.
Grey Lancer replied, his gigantic form gradually becoming transparent.
I suppose you already know this, but both I and the Duchess are illusions, temporarily given physical form from data recorded in the computers. But what a pleasant time I've had, Dee. I've gone across time and met an incredible man. Good speed, Dee,
said the left hand. Dee only gave a faint nod. The noble among nobles faded away. The others went outside. "What the hell?" Bly alone exclaimed. "The village, it's all rotting away. It's like the ruins of a place from 1,000 years ago." The farmhouses had collapsed. Only the pillars of the watchtower still stood, and all that was left of the river that had flowed there was a dry bed.
When the dreams of the nobility rotted away, that was the end of everything.
The hoarse voice said in a tone that carried an appreciable sense of pointlessness. "So everything is just a dream," Dee said somewhat uncharacteristically.
That's right. Some might ask if we're not just a dream too.
His left hand had a ring of indefinable sadness to it. By the time they'd buried Josette's remains and exited the village, it was nearly noon. Taking the highway west, they came to a tiny village where Bly halted his cyborg horse and said, "This is the place. So long."
Where are you going?
The left hand inquired, apparently more interested in other people's doings than Dee was. "The grave of a woman I left behind when I ran off, actually."
Oh, you don't say.
Just 3 years earlier, Bly had gotten caught up in some trouble gambling in a nearby village, and found himself on the run from the local thugs. Though he'd fled with the female gambler he was working with, it was here that their pursuers had caught up to them. Driven by fear, he'd left the woman behind and fled alone, having no news of her after that.
So now it's bugging you after all this time, and you're gonna bring her a flower?
Said the hoarse voice.
You're a sad individual.
Say what you like. So long. Bly hitched his steed to a nearby sapling, then walked east from the highway down a narrow street. Halting after 15 or 20 feet, he found cobblestones piled by the side of the street. There were 2 small graves. Pulling a single bloom of infinity weed from the inner pocket of his jacket, he placed it before the graves. It was a nice white flower. Dee probably understood why there were 2 graves. The man lingered at the graves for quite a while, and by the time he turned around, the hunter had already wheeled his steed around and headed west. Vampire Hunter D, Volume 27, Nightmare Village. End. Postscript. As I've mentioned in the past, I've traveled to Transylvania twice. The first time was on my own dime. The second was for a television program. As we traveled by van, what caught my eye in the ever-changing scenery outside the windows were the little villages. That was the basis for the setting of this vampire hunter detail. Isn't a village in a foreign land in itself enough to form a fantasy? When you think about it, fantasy is basically rooted in the tales of the forests, streams, and mountains at the edge of civilization. I suppose this Vampire Hunter D story continues that tradition. D's tale is based in fantasy and westerns. While both genres are set out on a frontier, they're still like oil and water. The western, with its setting in dusty, wind-whipped badlands, is a far cry from the haunted forests and lakes that form the cornerstone of fantasy. It would be strange to find a gunfighter with a pair of six-shooters stuffed in his belt, wandering through a deep forest. In a movie, it would be jarring, but fortunately a novel can make it work. D is someone who walks in two worlds, a knight from a foreign land, and a manner of speaking. The setting may be a tiny village, but it could hide cosmic secrets. I hope you'll enjoy that aspect of the book. An August day, 2010, while watching Higanjima 2010, Hideyuki Kikuchi.